Hi. These are my girls. They're lovely. In the summer of 2014, we were in a grocery store. My then 3-year-old was in the shopping cart, my 1-year-old on my hip, and we're analyzing some celery for dinner. Heavy stuff. This woman, obviously concerned, comes up to me and she rests her hand on my forearm and she says, "Honey, you're gonna fall." And I was like, oh my God, I'm dripping celery juice everywhere. I'm sorry. I wasn't. She saw that I was confused and clarified, and she said, "No, you can't take care of your children with that," which is absurd. So I said thanks, but no thanks, and shoot her along on her way, and didn't think of it again until the next day. I've assumed the same position. This time I'm making lunch in my home. I've got my 1-year-old on my hip again, and I'm doing the mom thing. But this time the hand that I feel on my forearm is that of my 3-year-old. And I look down and she says, "Mommy, you have to put Lily down. You can't take care of us." She mimics exactly what that stranger said the day before. And in that moment, I realize that the opinion, the judgment, the false judgment of this stranger undid the 3 years of presence, of example, of work that I had done with this little girl. It was completely undone. She looked heartbroken because the idea that mommy couldn't take care of her played to her deepest and darkest fears. And I was heartbroken. I felt like my daughter had lost faith in me. So I did as any mother would do, and I turned the solution into a game. I said, okay, fine, we are going to stop concentrating on similarities. No more of this, your hair is just like mommy's, and we have the same eyes, and same. I then decided that we were going to put focus on the differences. And it wasn't going to be just between us, because obviously, we're bigger, there's more to us than our family unit. And I said, everybody we see, we are going to notice their difference. We're going to acknowledge it, we'll talk about it, whatever you need. But here's the challenge. We are going to look beyond that difference, and we're going to go ahead and make that judgment. But that judgment is going to be creative, and it's going to be positive. I think it's human nature to make judgments on what we see, to compare the differences to our own points of reference. That's fine, that's healthy. But we have this habit of turning it into a really toxic thing. So, she would say, in our practice, "Mommy, that man crossing the street is taller than Daddy, and I bet he likes spiders." She loves spiders, so that's like the ultimate compliment. Or she would say, "That woman has a laugh louder than you. She must really like to read." These things weren't related necessarily, but she was able to notice a difference, be empowered by that, and turn it into something positive. Unfortunately, while this amazing stuff was happening with my then 3-year-old, I kept getting these, ignorance-based, asinine comments from people. It was just like a flood of them, almost in a serendipitous way. One woman, for example, sidled up to me in a cafe, motioned for me to take my earbuds off, and she said, "Do you ever think about just walking into the ocean and ending it all?" And I was like, "Oh, can I call somebody for you?" And she was like, "Oh God, no, not about me. I'm talking about you. Because if that happened to me, I would kill myself." I know, totally absurd. But this happened every single time I met a stranger, anytime I was in public, and it happened constantly for a span of a few weeks. It was then that I realized that the game that I was playing with my daughter was much needed with adults too. So I started the Redefining Disabled Project. And in this project, I find people with disabilities, differences, whatever you want to call them, We go ahead and we acknowledge them. We talk about them. I write about them. I photograph them. And then, after that, we leave plenty of time in our interview to talk about the humanity. What makes them a person? What lies beyond that disability that people tend to notice and only notice? Their skills, their strengths, their pet peeves, silly stories, things that some of their best friends and closest family members didn't even know about them because nobody thought to talk to them past the disability and past the difference. So, in the spirit of the Redefining Disabled Project, we're going to play a little game. I'm going to give you a few descriptors, and you are going to visualize people based on this descriptor, okay? First person is an international award-winning dancer who was male, incredibly strong. Oh, that's my logo. This is Olli. He has polio, vaccine-induced polio. And this is him dancing. He does not have use of his legs. He has to wear braces on his legs. But he is a phenomenal dancer. Phenomenal. The next person has spina bifida. Imagine a woman with spina bifida. Generally kind of a painful disease, a very painful disease, and the lifespan is very short of somebody who has spina bifida. Imagine that person. What does that person look like to you? This is Kailen. She has spina bifida, and she is powerful and so very Southern in a really lovely way, down to her very last pearl. The next person, imagine a badass, sassy black woman. Just the biggest personality you can think of. What does she look like to you? This is Gigi. She is all of that and more. Last but not least, imagine somebody with fibromyalgia. It's an invisible disability. She suffers from chronic pain, and that really dictates her day-to-day life. This is Jamie. She's a happy person, and for the most part a healthy person, with one of the most beautiful smiles and amazing senses of humor I've ever seen. So, game number 2, let's put into practice the game of the Redefining Disabled Project and the game that I had done with my daughter. You're going to look around. You're going to look around in the audience, find somebody that you don't know, which I think is going to be kind of easy. Find somebody you don't know, and go ahead and notice a difference. You don't need to strip people with your eyes or anything. Don't do that. That's rude. But it can be something as simple as their hair is darker or lighter, or that person looks smarter or not, whatever. But then challenge yourself to be creative and make a positive judgment about them. Maybe the engineer type with glasses, I don't know, maybe he really likes 18th century romantic literature. Maybe the girl with sorority letters on finds serenity in mowing the lawn. That guy who's in your class who you don't really know but is super annoying, maybe he has a soft spot for pug puppies. Get creative, do yourself justice, and do that person justice. Now, if you're doing it right, you could really entertain yourself just walking down the street. Because all you're doing is just kind of spewing out positivity and hopefully smiling, and we all know that smiles are contagious. And then maybe someday you'll actually tell your stranger what you thought about them. Tell them about this TED Talk. Tell them about your new practice. And then someday ask them, okay, you just look like the kind of person that speaks over 50 different languages. Is that true? Are you interested in becoming a Nobel Peace Prize winner? Because that's totally what I see in you. Get creative. Because positive body image is something that we have as our own defense mechanism, right? It's something that it's like an armor we put on, and then we go out into the world. I have positive body image and you can't touch me. But why don't we take that effort and expand it a little bit. Expand it a little further for our community, for the people around us. And say, not only am I going to think positive thoughts about myself and my own body, but why don't we do that for other people? What you're doing there, then, is making sure that your mind is a safe space for others to exist. Now imagine that. Every single time you walked out the door, you knew that everybody around you thought only the best of you. Probably was wrong, but that doesn't matter. I know this works. I absolutely know this works, because just last week I took my daughters to a museum here in the Triangle area, and I'm standing there giving my money to this man who's, for admission and giving us our tickets, and he has an enormous hipster lumberjack beard. It's enormous. It's like bigger than my head. And my now 4.5-year-old runs up to me and she says, "Mommy, he has such a huge beard!" And I could tell that she wanted to continue. But I followed her gaze and I saw that he was professional and patient, but probably just waiting for the criticism to end. It was a children's museum, so I'm sure he gets this all the time. But I knew that the next thing out of her mouth was going to be something positive. It was going to make me proud, it was going to uplift him, and it was going to allow her a voice. I thought everybody would win, so I looked down at her and I said, "Go ahead, sweetheart, continue." I'm brave. And she looked at me, she smiled, and she looked at him and she said, "I just want you to know, I really like it." And it wasn't anything profound. It wasn't even her best judgment that she'd come up with in the last year and a half. But it was still something kind, and it was still something positive. And I look at this guy, and he just looks like he's been hit by a bus, and he was like, "Okay, I'd never heard that before." And and she ran off, and it was great. She didn't say anything deep. She didn't notice anything that nobody else hadn't noticed already. I mean, the thing was enormous, like birds could live in it. But all she did was say, that difference between you and me, I like it. So here's my challenge for you. Go on about your lives, but when you look at people, notice those differences. And it doesn't have to be about disability. It could be about gender. It could be about race. Hell, even your presidential candidates are very different than you. Notice those differences, acknowledge them, honor that they exist, and then don't relegate them to sources of shame, because that's what makes us human, right? That's what makes us fun and creative. But then take it a step further and transcend that difference, making it into something positive. Turn that difference into a positive image. Empower the people around you. Do it again and again and again. And oh my God, doing it over and over again, that's totally the definition of insanity, right? But we owe it to ourselves. We owe it to ourselves to create safe spaces for us and for the people around us. So while that might be the definition of insanity, I think it's also the definition of humanity. Thank you.